Good morning. Mike, I think that's an enthusiastic, we need a coffee pot out here ASAP. We have been studying the apostles this quarter as we think back to the theme the elders have set for us this year of here am I, send me, and how can God use me in 2022. We think about how the apostles were sent, right? Isn't that what the word apostle means? One sent? Thank you. And then you elaborate on that. You can say one sent on behalf of another. They were sent on behalf of Jesus to spread the message. We've looked at what we typically would consider all of the main apostles to this point, right? We've gone through apostles 1 through 8. Peter, Andrew, James and John, Philip, Bartholomew, Matthew, Thomas. We've looked at all the ones where the Bible has things to say about them, save for Judas, who's going to be last. And today, we get to the spot where there are 3 apostles who basically are named, and between the 3 of them, there's one recorded statement in the Bible. So, rather than trying to do the painful thing that some Bible class teachers would do and try to stretch 40 minutes into each one of those one guys, we are going to get a 3-for-1 deal today. Can you tell I'm a salesman still? We are going to look at James the Less, Simon the Zealot, and we're going to look at Judas, not Iscariot. So let's start off with James the Less. What do we know about James the Less? On each of these guys, I could probably just cue the Jeopardy music and still hear nothing at the end of the 30 seconds, right? And that's the response, by the way, that I expected on everybody that was not Simon the Zealot, because we know he was a zealot. So let's look and see what we know about him. There are 4 different James that are in the New Testament. There's one that we've already spoken about, right? James, the son of Zebedee, the brother of John. Y'all remember who we said his mother most likely was, but we could not say for sure? Salome. All right. There is James, who was the half-brother of Jesus. Was James, the half-brother of Jesus, a follower of Jesus throughout his whole life? Nope. When did he become a believer? Later on, pretty well after the resurrection, right? Okay. There is James, the father of Judas, not Iscariot. And then finally, there is James the Less. How would you like to be immortalized in the Bible by having your name followed by 2 words, the Less? Sounds fun, right? At least he made the Bible. So, James is really going to teach us the importance of word studies in the process of elimination, okay? Because if it weren't for those things, we would have no idea who he is. But there's information recorded about him in the Bible. We know he was chosen to be an apostle of Jesus. And these are things that we can study, we can learn, and we can grow from. The first thing we want to consider is that he is the son of Alphaeus. Let's turn in our Bibles to Mark chapter 3. Mark 3, verses 14 through 19, as we look at the listing of the apostles. Mike, do you mind reading that for us, please?
And he ordained 12, that they should be with him, that he might send them forth to preach, and to have power to heal sicknesses, and to cast out devils. And Simon he surnamed Peter, and James the son of Zebedee, and John the brother of James, he surnamed them. On earth,
All right, so first point here, he is the son of Alphaeus. Now, also in Mark gives us more details about him than anyone else by sheer coincidence or by, we'll just call it providence because God put it in his word, right? God wants us to know this. Let's now go to Mark 15, and we'll read verses 39 through 41. Mark 15, 39 through 41. Josh Rogers, you got that one?
Mark 15, 39 to 41. So when the centurion who stood opposite him saw that he cried out like this and breathed his last, he said, "Truly this man was the Son of God." There was also a woman looking on from far, among whom were Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James the Less, and Joseph, and Salome,
Mm-hmm.
who also followed him and ministered to him, and he was in Galilee, and many other women who came up with him.
All right, so one, his mother is Mary, the wife of Clopas, as we'll see when we go to John 19 and 25. She is here at the very end. She followed Jesus from Galilee all the way throughout his ministry, all the way up to the very end where here he is. He is at Jerusalem. He has been crucified. He has died. And who does the Bible tell us there? But the mother of James the Less. By the way, we also found out he has a brother, right? He has a brother named Joseph. And then if we read, and I'll flip over and read this one real quick, John 19 and verse 25, as we read about this. We kind of did this a little bit when we looked at James, the son of Zebedee, and kind of narrowed this down. We had the big dry erase board. Now there stood by the cross of Jesus his mother, his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. So his mother's name appears to be Mary. She is the wife of Clopas. If she is the wife of Clopas, but his mother is Alphaeus, one of two things is going on, right? Either his father died and his mother remarried, or it's the same person who goes by two different names. If you go into the New Unger's Bible Dictionary, they believe and they tell you that it's the same person, that Alphaeus is the Greek name and Clopas is the Hebrew name. Either way, it's not really going to make that big of a difference. The one thing I want to point out is he is identified, one, by his father, the son of Alphaeus. In all the listings of the disciples, in all four sections where they are listed, the fact that he is a son of Alphaeus is brought about. Now we see here it is that he has a mother named Mary, and a brother named Joseph. So we're studying, we're learning about them. Another thing we can learn about James is the importance of parental influence. As I just stated, in all four listings of the apostles, his father is named. Two main reasons stand out in my mind why somebody is named. One, you're trying to identify someone and clarify, right? You've got two different James, James the son of Zebedee, James the son of Alphaeus. You were always during this time period introduced by your father's name. That's how people knew you. They'd say, "You're Mike's son." They'd say, "You're Ron's son." So we see that come out, but it also implies among the Jews something of import, that people would actually know who his father was. The other thing I want to point out is the Bible tells us more about his mother than it does about him. What does that say about the influence of a parent? That here is this woman who followed Jesus from Jerusalem to Galilee from Galilee all the way to Jerusalem, all the way through the very end, even after the death. She is there, and her son is chosen by Jesus to be one of his apostles. Do we sometimes take lightly our responsibility as parents? Or the influence that we as parents have over our children? I've said this before, and I know people kind of don't like to hear this. When women marry, they tend to marry someone who's like their father. It's a sociological fact. There's no working around it. You see it over and over and over and over again. Why? Because that's what they think a good father's supposed to be. That's what how they think a husband should treat a wife. So how we as husbands interact with our wives has a large impact on what our daughters are going to look for in a husband. By the way, a lot can be said about the flip side of this. Women, don't stone me for saying that, okay? You see some of that as well going on. When we tell our children, do this or don't do this, we say don't do this, but then we go and we do the exact thing we told them not to do, what do they learn? Words mean nothing, right? It's action. When we tell our children, don't do this, and they see us intentionally avoiding doing the things we've told them not to do, does that reinforce the teaching? Yes. When we have the right priorities as parents, our children learn from our priorities. I will give you an example. There was, at a congregation I used to be at, a young man graduating high school, getting ready to go off to college. His mom, he's, by the way, the child of an elder. His mom says, we're not going to be at Bible class Wednesday night. We've got to go and buy him a laptop for college. Is that sending a message to the child? And I know you may be saying he's 18, 18 is still a child. I call people in their 20s kids still. It's just one of those things that you do as you get older, just acknowledge it. Does that send a message? Does we're not going to be there because there's a baseball tournament? Does that send a message? Same child, I want to say maybe 3 years later, roundabout, somewhere around there. He suddenly elopes, unannounced. This is a very popular person, by the way. Everybody knew him, loved him. It would have been a huge wedding affair. And a couple of weeks later, there is an announcement that his wife is pregnant. And his dad stands up and makes the comment, and I'm telling you what people who witnessed it told me because I was not there, so for whatever that's worth. His dad basically stood up and read a statement and did not look at anybody as he was saying this. I mean, I'm jumping to a conclusion, but there's really only one logical conclusion you're going to come to when you see all this happening, right? They were doing things they shouldn't. She got pregnant. He said, okay, make it right, marry her. We'll go elope now. We'll announce it in a month. His dad also stepped down from being an elder not too long thereafter. Parental influence is hugely important because there is no one children learn more from than their parents, from mom and dad. And what better example could you have in a mother than someone who followed Jesus from Galilee all the way to Jerusalem? And here you see her at the death of Jesus, being there for Mary, the mother of Jesus, lending the emotional support to help her get through this very tough time. From James, we learn the power of parental influence. The Bible doesn't tell us much about him. This is where I get to the end and I give you that extra biblical tidbit. Tradition tells us that the Jews tried to force him to blaspheme by denying the resurrection of Jesus. They took him to the pinnacle of the temple where Satan tempted Jesus, and when he refused, they hold that they threw him down from the pinnacle, and yet he lived. So when the scribes and Pharisees realized he survived, they stoned him and beat him to death with a fuller's club. That's what history tells us, not the Bible. Take that for what it's worth. Any thoughts on James the Less? All right, moving on. We have Simon the Zealot. Who knows who the Zealots were? There's subtle hints.
They were considered what we would call modern day terrorists.
Okay. They were a political party with revolutionary tendencies. We might compare them even today to what a lot of Islamics do, right? They wanted to violently oppose and overthrow the government. When we look at this, we see Matthew and Mark refer to him as Simon the Canaanite. Luke refers to him as Simon the Zealot. The implication here is there's something that Matthew and Mark's audience, being Jewish, would naturally understand that Luke's audience, being a Gentile, would not. So Luke is making sure people know where Simon comes from. And just like James the Less, there is not a single recorded statement by him in the Bible. So when the Jews, and use the expression my dad used to use, when the Jews got too big for their britches, when they decided they were going to oppose the Roman government, Rome brought the hammer down on them so hard in the year 70 AD that they destroyed the temple, never to be rebuilt, right? This was an uprising that was led by the Zealots. And this was not the first time that the Zealots had led an uprising against Rome. If we go back, well, hold up, before I do that. Does everybody know what I'm talking about when I say 70 AD? Yes? Okay. This is what Daniel and Jesus refer to as the abomination of desolation when you come to Matthew 24. So their uprising led to that, and to the destruction of the temple, so that it was destroyed so that not one stone would be left upon another. So when Jesus spoke about the destruction of the temple and his disciples asked in Matthew 24 and Luke 21, when will these things come to pass and what will be the sign of your coming in the end of the age? They asked two different questions. This is the fulfillment of that first question. All right? Anybody familiar with the name Maccabee from history? I see about 4 head nods and a couple of raised eyebrows, like, what you talking about? So during the reign of Antiochus Epiphanes, from 167 BC to 160 BC, remember when it's before, we count down, not up, a family known as the Maccabees led a revolt against the Romans, right? Antiochus had issued a decree forbidding the practice of the Jewish religion. When you issue a decree forbidding someone from practicing their religion, does it ever end well? Throughout history, no, not once. So the patriarch of the Maccabee family, and I'm going to mispronounce the name, Mattathias, and his 5 sons organized the revolt. Mattathias died 1 year into the revolt, but history records his final words as, "And now, my children, be zealous for the law and give your lives for the covenant of your fathers." This statement accurately represents what the zealots who would stem from this rebellion believed. It's what they acted upon. They were willing to die, they were willing to be assassins, to be mercenaries, to do whatever was necessary to promote the free religion of the Jewish faith and to get rid of the oppressive Roman government. His son Judas took over after he died. They eventually regained the temple and reinstituted the proper worship of God. This is the basis for Hanukkah, the Jewish holiday. After the death of Antiochus, his successor entered into a treaty with the Jews, allowing them to worship freely, and there became peace. With this background, we could see that Simon was someone who was truly zealous for what he believed in, because there's going to be some things that would be hard for a zealot to follow, right? If you're going to follow the teachings of Jesus and you're a zealot, there's going to be a few things that you're not going to appreciate that Jesus is going to say and demand of you. Number one, you are to be subject to the governing authorities. Based on what I literally just said about the Maccabean revolt, the history of the zealots, does this seem like something that's going to sit well with Simon? No. Number two, love your enemies. Not go kill them until they're all dead. Love your enemies. And number three, along with being in subjection to Rome, pay your taxes to Rome. Does Jesus have teachings that sometimes, especially when you initially read about them, maybe without deep study, have you ever heard a teaching of Jesus that made you uncomfortable? I'm just going to go ahead and say it for everybody. The answer is yes. I know that's not a question anybody ever actually wants to admit, that the answer is yes. But you hear something and you're like, ooh, I don't know about that. But then you get into it, you study it, you see the rationale, you see the reasoning, you understand the logic, and you place your faith in the fact that Jesus knows better than you and me. Simon would have had to undergo some changes in his life to be a follower of Jesus and to be the apostle that he was called to. Number one change he was going to have to go through was some of his political beliefs. Do political beliefs today border on religion? Nobody had a problem saying yes to that one, right? When you hear somebody start talking, and they start talking about politics, are you readying your argument and rebuttal in your head already? Have you already checked out and said, I'm not listening to anything this person says? Or if they agree with you, are you getting the amens ready? When it comes to politics, I mean, I know what I believe. I know why I believe it. I'll listen to some people. I've listened to people repeatedly share why they believe the opposite. To me, it's just logical fallacies that they've got. But I also have this thing where I just know that that leads to debate. It leads to argument. When you're on Facebook, it leads to people unfriending you, right? I just kind of mentally check out. I actually had a coworker, and he was as far the opposite spectrum of political beliefs as he could be from me. But you know, we had this one area where we came together. That was when we went into the break room. I would go in, and the first thing I would do is turn off the news. I don't care if it's the news that says things I agree with. I don't care if it's the news that says things I disagree with. And he saw me come in and do that one day, and he asked, and he said, look, when it comes to politics, I don't care if I agree with you or disagree with you. I'm here for work, and what's coming out of that TV has nothing to do with your and my relationship. That shocked him. And he would be in there watching one station, and when I would come in thereafter, he would grab the remote and he would change it to ESPN or something that was not news. Why? Because he respected the fact that the statement I made, even if we disagree, doesn't mean we have to be disagreeable. And number two, even if I agree with you, I'm here to eat my lunch. I don't really want to hear this right now, you know? I watch a few minutes of the news each day to make sure we're not being bombed, to know what's going on. And then I'm checking out. How people can sit and watch it for 12 hours in a day and maintain their sanity is beyond me. Simon was going to have to lay down some of his political beliefs and act on faith in following Jesus instead of what he had been indoctrinated with his entire life. Is that an easy decision for anyone to make? Do we sometimes today let politics get in the way of Christianity? If anybody says no, I'm just going to call you on it. I think you're lying to yourself. Most widespread belief holds that after evangelizing in Egypt, he joined Jude in Persia, Armenia, and Beirut. And they were both martyred in Beirut in 65 AD. Two references to his death. One believes he was suffered crucifixion as the bishop of Jerusalem. The other says he was sawn in two. An artwork regarding Simon the Zealot shows him holding a saw. That tells you what most people in history tend to believe happened. What everyone agrees on is he died for his faith, for proclaiming the gospel. Thoughts, comments, questions about Simon the Zealot, who was also a Canaanite, by the way.
I agree with you that even today, those three right there, a lot of people have issues with. I like Jesus, but when it comes to that, I don't know, Lord. You know, I mean, I've heard people say it for a T, I mean, just straight up. But it's just one of those things where, you know, you just can't let those things get in the way. Jesus comes first. It's that simple, and I know we all know that.
There's a difference between knowing something and applying it, though. Other thoughts? All right, let's go move on to Judas, not Iscariot. There were 6 different men in the New Testament by the name of Judas. That tells us that's a common name, about as common as John would be today. I remember in school there were 3 Johns and 3 Chris's in every class, and 3 Christys and 3 Jennifers. I don't know what the names are today that everybody's going for, but there's always some kind of name that's number 1, and you go to school. See, I was fortunate. As a Chad, there was one guy I'd come run into, and we'd have one class together every year for 2 or 3 years, and there weren't any other Chads in the school. It was kind of a unique name. Then I got to college, and there were 3 of us. Sarah actually said, I never knew a Chad my entire life till I met you. And now we're at Faulkner, and there's 3 of y'all. The 6 different Judases are, and I've got the scripture reference for y'all if y'all want to know who they are, make note to go study and maybe distinguish a little bit more later on. There is Judas, who is also called Jude, who is the half-brother of Jesus. Other than being the half-brother of Jesus, anyone know what he is famous for? Heard somebody say it, writing the book of Jude. All right? Acts 5:37 references a Judas of Galilee who led a rebellion in the days of the census. Acts 9 references a Judas who provided lodging for Paul. Acts 15 references a Judas also called Barsabbas who accompanied Paul and Barnabas on missionary work. And of course, there is the one we're going to talk about next week, Judas Iscariot, who betrayed Jesus. And then there's finally Judas, not Iscariot, who was also called Thaddeus and Lebbaeus, often referred to by scholars as the man with three names. Wouldn't that get a little confusing? Which one do I answer to this time? 6 different men by the name of Judas. That's the first thing we want to do, is distinguish which are which. All we know about this man is one statement recorded from him in Scripture. Anybody who's been here the whole study want to guess what book of the Bible contains the one statement that he made? John. Okay, that tells me people are paying attention. I like that. John chapter 14, beginning in verse 21. The context is Jesus has told his disciples and the apostles and everybody gathered there, I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go to prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you to myself, that where I am, there you may be also. This is where Philip, if I remember correctly, is it Philip? Yeah, Philip asked the question, how do we get to the Father? Jesus answered that question. We spoke about it a couple weeks ago when we spoke about Philip. And now it comes to this context. John 14, beginning in verse 21, Jesus said, he who has my commandments and keeps them, it is he who loves me. And he who loves me will be loved by my Father, and I will love him and manifest myself to him. Judas, not Iscariot, said to him, Lord, how is it that you will manifest yourself to us and not to the world? Jesus answered and said to him, if anyone loves me, he will keep my word, and my Father will love him, and we will come to him and make our home with him. He who does not love me does not keep my words, and the word which you hear is not mine, but the Father's. What can we learn from Judas, not Iscariot? I got a real simple one. It's okay to ask questions, right? When I was in high school and people started coming out with themes for things right around this time, every year would have a theme, and it was something that really hadn't gone on before. The theme my senior year was, why think? And the goal behind that was, if you got a question, just ask the question. Of course, some of the teachers weren't really the greatest teachers, and they probably were not on board with the theme and their idea was, you think and figure it out for yourself. That's a stupid question you're asking me. Literally, that's what the senior English teacher said to somebody. What happens if we have questions and we do not ask them? Scott mouths, we don't know. If we don't know, and we're talking about a matter of our faith, the faith upon which we stand in Christ, is our faith going to be strong? Our faith is weakened. So when we have a question, why do we not ask it? So let me ask you, have you ever had a question, but you refused to ask it? Yeah. Why did you refuse to ask the question? Thought we should know the answer. That's a very common one in the church, right? I don't want to ask a question because I've been here so long that everybody thinks I should know this. Are you afraid sometimes somebody might mock you and pick on you a little bit? I'm guilty of this. I've got a quick wit, and I have to catch myself sometimes. I hear something, and just the quick wit jumps on me, and I want to spit it out real quick, but if you catch yourself and you pause and think about it and you're like, no, this is going to come off way wrong. I'm going to come off across as rude and insulting this person, even though I'm picking at him in good fun. Could it be sometimes we don't want to really know the answer? Okay, let me flip this on you a little bit. As a parent, most people in here are parents. Have you asked your child a question and you know full well they know the answer, but they don't answer? Ryan's like, Mom, don't answer that. They don't want to do it because they're going, if they answer the question, you're going to have to acknowledge I'm wrong about something. So going back to the apostle we just studied about Simon, do you think Simon would have had some questions for Jesus and some times that he really didn't like the answer? Think maybe he thought, I don't know if I want to ask him this question. So I'll put it to you this way, is ignorance better or knowledge upon which to stand? I phrased it in such a way that the answer is knowledge, right? We got the saying, ignorance is bliss. Y'all have heard that your whole lives. But when we know what it is we believe and we know why it is we believe it, it enables us to stand firm. What happens if you go to try to talk to somebody about something and you're not 100% convinced yourself? If I go and I try to sell Ryan a rainbow vacuum cleaner and I spend 3 hours cleaning his house, yeah, well, y'all have been through there. Y'all know they've come and they do it. That's what happens. So, but I'm going to sell him. I was like, oh, it's a vacuum, and look at all the stuff it gets. But man, like, $4,000 for a vacuum cleaner? Did I not just make Ryan's mind up for him when I said $4,000 for a vacuum cleaner like that? When you know what it is you believe, you know why you believe it, you're able to stand. And I'm having flashbacks to Psalm 1. Like a tree that's planted by the water, I shall not be moved. It's important to ask questions. It's important to know what you believe and why you believe it. And for our younger people, it is especially important to learn while you are younger. Because there comes a point as someone gets older, the older you get, the harder it is to learn. And there does come a point where people's minds become like concrete, thoroughly mixed up and permanently set. And it's better while you're young and you're open to learn these things. When I was in Texas, and I haven't taught it here just because we just introduced the class recently, but my favorite class to teach was a middle school classroom. You know why? Even though they were 13, 14, and I know everybody hears that age, they're like, ugh. They're still willing to admit there are things they don't know, and they're open to learning at that time period. And they haven't reached the high school group where it's not cool to answer questions when the teacher asks you, right? I mean, have y'all not seen that? It's just one of those things. You get to a certain age and you don't want to be the kid that's always answering every question. It's important to learn while we're younger and commit these things to our minds and hearts so our resolve will be that much firmer when we are older. There are multiple reports from history about the death of Judas not Iscariot. One states that he was beaten to death with sticks while preaching the gospel to some pagan priests. One says he was beheaded with an axe for his faith. There are others as well. Those are the two most common. The only thing that everybody agrees on who talks about his death and the manner of his death is that he died for proclaiming the gospel. That said, any thoughts, comments, questions, complaints regarding Judas, not Iscariot, or any of the other two? Yes, ma'am.
Going back to the asking questions thing, I think it's also important to find a good source when you to ask those questions too. I went to an elder preacher PhD once and asked some Bible questions. There was a parable I didn't understand, and he gave me this huge, like a politician who says a lot of words but doesn't convey a lot. He did that to me. He hit me with all these PhD terms and stuff, and I left feeling this big. So I didn't ask questions after that because I didn't want to feel stupid. And Judas went straight to the source, so he knew you don't Google it. You're going to get taken down this side path of denominations. It's going to give you the wrong answer. You've got to go to a credible source.
And who should be the number one source somebody goes to when they have a question? I typically have kids in mind when I say this, but even as we get older, we tend to do it. Who should we go to first with our questions? If you're a kid, the answer is mom and dad, right? Are mom and dad always going to be the best source? No. There are plenty of parents out there who aren't Christians, who don't want their kids to be Christians, but that's the pattern that should be established, is learning from mom and dad. Other great sources, teachers, and I'm referencing Bible class teachers, but I asked a lot of questions in school that I didn't know the answer to. Did there come a point when it was not cool to ask the questions, and I learned from sheer mockery to keep my question to myself usually? Yeah, I learned that, as you get into high school and other things. But it's okay to ask. Go to a trusted source. That's why I say typically for kids, mom and dad should be the trusted source. What about my Bible class teacher? Should a Bible class teacher be a trusted source? The answer should be yes. What about the minister, the elders, the deacons? What about just going up to somebody you know as a faithful member of the church and saying, hey, you've been around a while. I've got a question. Can you help me? I don't remember who it was. Somebody said something to me when I was at Conyers. And it's I don't know, it's something to the effect of somebody made a comment in class and they were wondering about it. And I said to them, look, I've been a Christian for about 20 years. I get that I went to Faulkner. I get I got a master's in Bible. But I'd be an arrogant idiot if I said I got more Bible knowledge. And I pointed to Sarah's aunt, who had been teaching the Bible to kids longer than I've been alive. It's just one of those things. She knows, and she's one of those who will ask the question that makes people uncomfortable in class sometimes because it's kind of contrary to what we typically think of, but based on the context, it's a logical question. There are plenty of people who have trusted, good knowledge. You don't have to go to somebody that has a title in the church to ask them a question. Who do you know? Julie pointed out that one of her favorite people to listen to in class, I remember this, was Buddy. Buddy is very knowledgeable. Is Buddy an elder or deacon? No, but has he been studying the Bible longer than I've been alive? Yes. He's very strong in his faith. He set a great example. He's a good person to ask a question to. Then there's plenty others. I'm just using that because it's jumped in my mind just now. Any other thoughts, comments, or questions?
Chad, you mentioned not many people are named Chad.
Mm-hmm.
For years, I have been trying to get my children and grandchildren to name their sons Homer. It has not worked.
Did you reference Homer Haley, the great Bible scholar? Because maybe they're thinking of Homer Simpson and I'm not going to do it. All right, guys, when we come back together next week, we're going to talk about Judas Iscariot. The following week, we'll wrap up and we'll bring in Paul. I know I want to say 2 weeks after that. I've got a topic in mind. I'm still trying to finalize my thoughts on it. I don't want to tell you and get you excited and then have to go, okay, I can't get it really the way I want. We're going to do something different. But I appreciate everyone. We'll come back together.